Welcome back for another book review. Today we are talking about the Green Wiccan Spell Book, a compendium of magical knowledge, and I have absolutely no idea how to say this author's name. The brief description of this book is that really this is not a green Wicca book. It's not anything really to do with the green community here in Wicca and witchcraft. That kind of has its own set of things that tend to be associated to it, and this is just another beginner basic Wicca book, so do keep that in mind. The title does feel a little bit misleading with that part. And I will say, while it's aimed at beginners, I do feel like you should have some form of a basic foundation on the practices of Wicca, because again, this is a Wicca book, but have some form of a little bit of knowledge experience before you jump into the spells. Outside of the spells portion of this book, which is the majority of it, the rest of it is relatively common for a beginner Wicca book, and it is very small and very just brief on those topics, which is why I feel like it's one of those where you might need to know a little bit more before you just jump into the spells section. I would rate this one a 4 out of 5, and the reason being is that I continuously wavered on my opinion for this book. Anytime I would pick it up, I would go back and forth because at certain points, the writing is incredibly awkward and janky, and it just reads like you're stumbling down a hill. And then at other points, it flows beautifully. I don't know why there was such a random shifting back and forth. It wasn't really consistent. And I know the feeling because I have that with my own current book where it's just the words aren't wording. And it just feels like the author and the editor just couldn't figure out a way to fix up some parts of it. It just didn't flow, where others, it was flowing wonderfully. So that's why I kept going back and forth. Sometimes it was really awkward and the sentences were just oh my. But other times it was really, really good. The information in this book is pretty standard for a small beginner Wiccan book. There's nothing that made this part of Green Wicca or Green Witchcraft. I mentioned that earlier. It's just your usual beginner Wiccan book, and it is relatively small, so the topics that are brought up are very brief, and it's just, a paragraph or two of an explanation. As I mentioned before, the majority of this book is really the spells section, and it was surprisingly interesting, because typically you kind of have your generic spells. This didn't have it. It actually had a nice mix of the more complex tool and supply heavy spells and a lot of the, you gotta do your spell circle casting and gather all the ingredients and all of that side of doing spells. And then there was others where it's hey, just wear this crystal or make this tea. And so I loved that it had kind of more, that's almost more folk magic versus green. But even then, the spells never really came across as green Wicca or green witchcraft. They just came across as traditional Wicca spells. And again, almost a little bit of the folk magic of just again, folk magic being that it's very simple. You don't have a lot of words to say. It's common ingredients. You just do the thing basically. And so it did have quite a few of those. And the range of topics was really impressive for such a small book. And basically what happens is there's a section and then various spells and tips and things for that topic. So there was buying a house, finding a love. There was parts for also rekindling love. There was one for a breakup. There was a lot of really good information and a variety of different things for the spells, which I was really impressed by because it is a very small book. All that said, would I buy this book? The answer is maybe. If it was gifted to me, I definitely wouldn't be mad, but I'm also not sure that I'm gonna go out and just buy this one immediately compared to the other books that I want to go out and actively buy. I would say the intended audience for this book is definitely beginner Wiccans. If you're a beginner witch, you might also appreciate this, but it is very heavily Wicca based. The only kind of other notes section that I have for this particular book was one quote that was pretty early in the book, but I just absolutely loved it, and it talks about how magic works. This comes from page 14 and goes as following. Magic has no certainties or guarantees. What it does do, though, is change probability. For example, if you do a spell to win the lottery, even if your chances double, they are still tiny, which is why you won't find any such spells in this book. But if you are one of 3 people up for promotion, doubling your chances with a spell will significantly increase your prospects of getting the job. And I just thought that was such a great way to describe how magic works in a lot of ways because, a lot of people will say, well, if you're doing magic and spells, why doesn't it work? And like, why can't you win the lottery? And why isn't every witch very rich? And the reality is that it is this. It's you're changing your probability of things. You're trying to influence the web of weird just a little bit in your favor. Or, you're trying to convince whatever the powers may be to like move in your favor. You're trying to increase your luck. You're trying to increase your chance of coincidence that the thing you're wanting is going to happen. And I felt like this was such a great way to put it, where it's like, yeah, we would all love to win the lottery, but there's like literally so many people trying to also do the exact same thing. And yet, if it's 1 in 3, and I've had that situation many a times where you're up against just a couple of people for a job, and then do a magic spell of any kind, a little bit of influence here and there, and then boom, you get that. And it's like, hey, like I just increasing my chances for the thing to happen. And I did find a number of the spells really intriguing, and I love the way they were described. It makes me want to go out and actually buy a specific stone for all of the magical purposes that she mentions. I took my own notes just for my own Book of Shadows of like, hey, so this stone seems to be one that I need to just carry around all the time. I think I might actually have one, but my witchy storage right now is a hot mess. But like the notes in here and like the different spells were just like so much fun. I absolutely love them. I think there was just a lot of great ideas. Again, there's just a bit of everything in here. Like there was some for like trying to find a house and like selling your house, and there's like something that you're supposed to say every day when you look at your house's listing. And then if you like are going to have a viewing that day, like to burn the specific incense and have like a specific kind of visualization that you're doing as you're cleaning and tidying up for the viewing. And then also like for like the for sales, I'm focusing on that specific section because that's what I have the notes up for. But like for specifically to like attract attention to your for sale sign, place a clear quartz crystal point behind it by the street. Like it's such a variety of different spell types. You've got visualization, there's a different one of like the thing to say every morning, and just putting a clear quartz point behind the little for sale sign. Like these are just points that are so all over the place, and that's what I love about it. It has complex spells. It goes from, again, having visualization, words to say, burning candles, using herbs, all these things, but then also a little bit more of that folk thing of like, hey, like burn this thing in your house or put this rock here, this specific rock I should say here. So I absolutely loved the spells. I was really pleasantly surprised because leading up to it I really wasn't sure, and a lot of times when I see an author is like a major contributor to a magazine and it feels kind of really like uberly trendy, I get real nervous because a lot of times it does come across as just the cosmopolitan, the Vogue type that's just out there trying to get people to look at their things, which makes sense. It's a business. But it's nice when this doesn't happen and the spells actually seem legit. The person seems really good. I know I have another book coming up from this author, and so I'm hoping that some of the issues were just like maybe this was a little off. Again, that writing was just a little awkward, and I know things could be explained a lot longer, but it is a small book, and sometimes I think like publishers plan it that way, put that limit. So like maybe that's why it feels that way, because the next book is like a decent sized book in comparison. So hopefully the next one is going to be really good. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this book in the comments down below. A huge thank you, as always, to my patrons. I have a bunch of content going up this month. It is at the end of the video at some point, so you can see all of the videos going up this month. Do make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I post every single day. I do a bunch of book reviews, and I have new fun things planned for the weekends, so keep an eye out for those. And of course, until next time, thank you so much for coming along as we talk about the Green Wiccan Spell Book. And until next time, blessed be.